This happened a few years ago. I've told parts of it before, usually as a joke, but I always leave out the ending. Once you hear how it finishes, it stops sounding funny. It starts sounding like something you don't want to think about too long. At the time, I lived alone in a second-floor apartment in Madison, Wisconsin. The kind of place that gets real winters. Snowbanks along the sidewalks, salt-stained stairs, that quiet heaviness in the air where sound doesn't travel as far. My birthday was coming up in early February, and that was honestly the biggest thing on my mind back then. The apartment complex itself was completely ordinary. Key fob entry, shared mailroom near the leasing office, thin walls, neighbors who nodded but didn't really talk. I'd been there almost a year without any problems. I felt safe enough to stop thinking about safety altogether. That Tuesday was unremarkable in every way. I remember getting home from work just after dark, snow crunching under my boots. I wasn't thinking about anything except dinner and getting out of my work clothes. When I stepped into the mailroom, I noticed a box sitting on the counter. It didn't stand out. It looked like it belonged there. My name was printed clearly on the label, spelled correctly, with my apartment number underneath. No handwriting, no note, nothing that made my pulse jump. With my birthday coming up and the holidays barely behind us, my first thought was that it was something from family, or maybe a return I'd forgotten about. Earlier that month, I'd mailed a bag of older clothes to a local donation charity, the kind that sends out prepaid shipping labels so you can clear out your closet without thinking too much about it. I remembered dropping it off and not giving it another thought. Standing there in the mailroom, I assumed this box must be related to that, maybe returned because of a sorting or labeling error. I carried it upstairs without any real concern. Inside my apartment, I set the box on the kitchen counter and opened it while still wearing my coat. For a second, my brain didn't quite process what I was seeing. Inside was a gray hoodie, folded neatly. Recognition came slowly, then all at once. It was my hoodie. A small bleach stain near the cuff, something I'd done months earlier and never bothered to fix. I'd left that hoodie draped over the edge of my laundry basket a few days earlier after pulling it out of the dryer, telling myself I'd put it away later. Seeing it there felt strange but not alarming. I told myself I must have tossed it into the donation bag without realizing it, and the charity had simply sent it back. It wasn't a perfect explanation, but it was good enough. I taped the box shut and slid it into the back of a kitchen cabinet, planning to deal with it later. That night, I slept a little lighter than usual, waking once or twice to the sound of the building settling in the cold, but nothing happened. A full week passed. The hoodie stopped feeling important. I felt faintly embarrassed for how much it had bothered me at all, chalking it up to winter nerves and an overactive imagination. Then, one evening, I came home and saw another box waiting in the mailroom. Same size, same clean label, my name printed neatly on the front. This time, my body reacted before my brain did. I felt that slow tightening in my chest, the kind that doesn't spike into panic, but doesn't let go either. I picked it up and carried it upstairs without opening it. Inside my apartment, I set the box on the kitchen table and stood there for a long moment, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of someone moving in the hallway. When I opened it, I froze. Inside was a mug. It took a second for the recognition to land, and when it did, my stomach dropped. I knew that mug because it was part of my routine, something I used every morning without thinking about it, something I had used that same morning before leaving for work. I lifted it out of the box slowly, my hands feeling numb, then turned toward the sink. It was empty. That was the moment the fear became real. This wasn't something I'd forgotten or donated. Someone had entered my apartment while I was gone, taken something I'd just used, and returned it before I got home. I checked the locks, the windows, the door frame. Everything was intact, no damage, no sign of forced entry. The apartment looked exactly the way I'd left it, and that somehow made it worse. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the timing in my head, trying to understand how quietly it could have happened, how close it must have been. By morning, one thought had settled in clearly. If this happened again, I wouldn't ignore it. The next day, I bought 2 security cameras. One went in the living room, angled toward the front door, and the space where I spent most of my evenings. The other went in the bedroom, positioned to capture the doorway and the dresser. I didn't tell anyone. I just needed something objective, something that could either confirm my fear or finally disprove it. For the next 2 weeks, I checked the footage every morning. Nothing ever looked wrong. The videos showed me coming home, cooking, watching TV, going to bed. No unexplained movement, no missing time, no glitches. Slowly, the tension began to ease. I told myself the cameras had worked, that whoever had been inside before had backed off. Eventually, I stopped checking the footage altogether. A few days later, the 3rd package appeared. It was smaller than the others. I carried it upstairs without opening it, my hands already shaking. Inside my apartment, I set it on the table and stared at it for a long moment before cutting the tape. Inside was a key, my spare apartment key. I recognized it instantly, the worn edge, the small scratch near the top. I knew exactly where it was supposed to be. I'd put it in the top drawer of my bedroom dresser 2 days earlier, after setting up the cameras, wanting it somewhere I could find it easily. That drawer sat just a few feet from where I slept. The realization hit hard and fast, leaving me lightheaded, my heart pounding so loudly it felt hollow. Someone had gone into my bedroom. Someone had opened that drawer. Someone had done it recently. Then I noticed something else in the box. A folded piece of paper tucked beneath the key. My hands were shaking as I opened it. "You think the camera is going to stop me?" That was when terror finally took over. That sentence wasn't angry. It wasn't threatening. It was confident. Whoever had written it didn't care about the cameras because they already knew they didn't matter. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app. The bedroom footage from the previous night was wrong. The video jumped forward in time without explanation, skipping over more than an hour. There were no error messages, no alerts, just missing time. The living room camera showed the same thing. Different camera, same night, same unexplained gap. Both cameras had stopped recording and started again on their own. That was the moment everything collapsed into certainty. Whatever this was hadn't just been inside my apartment before the cameras, it had been there after, and it had been there without being recorded. I grabbed clothes, documents, my laptop, anything within reach, and left. I called the police from my car, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I never spent another night in that apartment. What still stays with me isn't just that someone was inside my home, but how deliberately they let me realize it, step by step, only once it was already too close to ignore. They weren't trying to scare me at first. They were letting me know how easily they could reach me. And if I hadn't left when I did, I don't want to imagine what would have come next.